Hello everybody, it's me, Lou, and today I wanted to make a video about how I became an accidental academic entrepreneur. I asked my small audience on Instagram what kind of content they'd like to see from me. For context, my journey since recovering from an eating disorder when I was 20 years old, becoming an academic, finding my calling, and really going for broke on that dream as it used to be. I made my way through undergrad, masters, and even submitted my PhD. And I basically got to a point, as I shall describe shortly, where I realized that academia wasn't actually for me. It was a very difficult thing to come to terms with. Now, this story really starts in earnest in 2019. This is the second year of my PhD, and I went to Pembroke College, Cambridge, on a big juicy scholarship and couldn't have been prouder of myself, actually. I had had a really rough time doing my master's in Oxford, completely hated it. After that, I took a massive gap year in 2018. It was absolutely brilliant. Me and my husband went traveling, Canada, USA, Switzerland. We spent probably 3 whole months that year abroad. We got married. It was fantastic. I was literally thinking, I'm living my best life. I couldn't be happier. So happy to be married to my absolute soulmate. And obviously I managed to get a few scholarships to Cambridge and had the luxury of picking between them. So I ended up going to Pembroke, and it was a wonderful environment. It was such a breath of fresh air, having been at Oxford previously, where it was pretty toxic on the whole. Things at Cambridge were off to a pretty decent start, actually, but it wasn't long until certain expectations began to manifest. I really had to step up to the plate. One thing that I hadn't really done too much of before my PhD was giving talk, presenting in seminars, even attending workshops and seminars with the faculty members, postgrad students, postdocs. These kinds of academic environments were previously not very well known to me, and they scared me. They really did. I was always anxiously disposed and for sure had some kind of personality performance anxiety, really. These days I chalk it up to just being highly conscientious, and the fact that this is part of my DNA means I catastrophize a lot. I worry about things I shouldn't. I worry about things going wrong that might not go wrong. And I'm very capable of feeling like I won't cope, I can't cope. The chances of me bailing on the whole situation, whether voluntarily or through some kind of panic attack, is just super likely. So I want to call this part of my PhD the crappening. The crappening really began incrementally, actually, although I would say I did throw myself straight in at the deep end. So in my last year of undergrad, I had given my first talk. It was actually in the summer between second and third year, and I had an abstract accepted, which meant that I could go to this conference on self-cultivation, which was a really cool topic, actually, in Italy. So going abroad to give a talk, lovely. I was incredibly nervous about that. It was my first ever talk, and I was the only undergrad in this whole thing. Everybody else was postdoc, PhD, faculty, the full works. I found it very difficult to cope with the idea of giving a talk. It was obvious to me, it had been obvious to me from when time began, really, that giving talks and being being that person on any given day, if it was, at school and we were giving presentations or any of this stuff, while part of me loved the challenge of performing and delivering value effectively, it was always hugely stressful. I could barely speak for being able to breathe properly. Like, I would be trying to speak and give like a talk or something, and I'd be forgetting to breathe. Like, it was a whole mess. Before I gave this talk as an undergrad, I'd gone to my doctor because I'd done some Googling, and I was looking for something that was going to help me manage my nerves. And obviously I didn't want to be 3 Chardonnays to the wind. They prescribed me beta blockers, and these beta blockers were friggin' amazing, mostly. I did a bit of experimenting before my talk in Italy, and I was just, seeing kind of how much of a dose I was going to need to really manifest that tranquility in me. Because basically what beta blockers do is they reduce your heart rate, prevent your body releasing adrenaline. Anyhows, I'm in this talk in Italy. I'm standing there giving my speech, as my parents like to call it. I am as cool as a cucumber. Like, my heart isn't even racing. I'm just stoicism personified, and I'm just standing there like, wow, I can really do this. I came out of that whole experience feeling actually like I could actually really be a lecturer. I had shown to myself that, okay, with some adaptations, it was possible for me to give a talk. It was, once I was on the beta blockers, it wasn't really scary anymore. Fast forward to the first year of my PhD, I decide that I'm going to volunteer to give the first kind of presentation amongst people in my research area. I had this whole paper. It was kind of the first chapter of my PhD, effectively, and it was a pre-read session, so there actually wasn't anything to worry about on the sort of delivery front, which was brilliant. But I got completely annihilated. The folks who were my audience members, who were some final year PhD students and a couple of postdocs, basically just ripped me to shreds. It was just fully humbling, and it was a terrible experience. I really didn't see it coming, which made me feel stupid, naive, and it actually really kind of got the ball rolling on a hugely anxious period of my life where I was really questioning whether I could cope with this interpersonal, discursive side of academia. After that, I really started to avoid these kinds of situations. I was avoiding anything where you had to give a talk, anything where you would be expected to participate in any kind of verbal way. So I stopped going to seminars, workshops, you could even go to sort of lectures, undergrad lectures if you so chose. But I wasn't going to anything, and I could just about attend a supervision, but even then I was getting so intensely worked up about being asked questions I couldn't answer, not being able to defend my research, my arguments, and I just literally became just a gibbering, non-attending idiot, hiding away at home, really thinking, I can't do this. I can't be the person academia needs me to be. And my God, there's a lot of people who are cut out for it. And this wasn't necessarily about not being clever enough, although I didn't feel clever enough. Philosophy, the subject I studied, has a real sort of culture of genius. This was something that really ruined my experience at Oxford. At undergrad, I'd been really good. I'd come like top of the year. It was blimmin' triumphant, and I came out of that degree feeling feeling like a boss, actually. I really felt like I had this. And then, yeah, so Oxford was just one hell of a febrile kind of philosophy bro environment. But suffice to say that I had similar experiences at Oxford, actually, as what I've just described happening in my first term at Cambridge. But I also was capable of kind of showing myself that even if I wasn't going to be a sort of visible presence in the philosophy faculty, that I could nevertheless succeed in my written work. During my last term at Oxford, the term where you write your dissertation, my dissertation supervisor was like the big cheese on Plato, and I was writing my dissertation on Plato. Really challenging philosopher, actually, if I might say so. I was doing a master's in ancient philosophy, and part of why I had wanted to do that was actually because I'd always wanted to understand Plato better and be capable of really digesting his dialogues and kind of getting to the sort of philosophical meat of the writings. I basically spent my last term at Oxford actually avoiding and cancelling my supervisions with this big cheese professor on Plato, because I just simply couldn't cope with just seeing this person and the kind of like the fear, the anxiety, the feeling of actually not being good enough. It really stopped me engaging interpersonally with really anybody, and especially this guy. Like, I was completely in awe of him, and I honestly just thought it was just psyching me out. And I just thought, do you know what? I'm just going to try and boss this piece of research, just get my head down, do this research as capably as I possibly can. If I don't go to any supervisions, I don't go to any supervisions. As far as they're concerned, it's my loss. I'll take the risk. And I ended up getting a distinction. And I couldn't actually believe it, because it sort of proved me right that I was capable of succeeding, even if I chose to do it in this slightly weird, avoidant way. Anyway, back to the crappening. So this must have been the early months of 2019. So I had managed to talk to my supervisor about this, horrible seminar that I had this pre-read paper. But she was actually pretty horrified that I'd had that experience, and she was thinking maybe these other people, they've done a hazing ritual to you, Lou. It's no biggie. That's not really how academia really goes. So I was kind of like totally PTSD settings after this. I was like, it was even a struggle to even see my supervisor, frankly. But obviously I did need the feedback chapter by chapter as I was writing my PhD. So she was like, do you know what, Lou? I'm organising a seminar. I'm going to be there. I'm a safe person for you. Please come. You don't have to really do anything, but it would be really nice to see you engaging, asking a few questions, and, see how it goes. And I was kind of like, do you know what? If I can't even do this, then I've got serious problems. So I go to this thing. It's on Kant's aesthetics. So I work on Kant's practical philosophy. So this was definitely of interest to me. So even if I went just on that pretext, it was fine. It was at Selwyn College, which was, a little walk across town. And so I go to this thing. So basically I'm sitting in this seminar room. I don't know, only 15 other people here. I can, see faces I recognize. I'm glad to see some of the people I don't like aren't actually there. So I'm kind of like, okay. But some of them are. And I'm like, give a wide berth. And so I'm just sitting there, and the first person gives their talk, and the floor is open to questions. And I just suddenly feel this just intense tensing up of my whole body, and I'm honestly at a point where I don't even think I can breathe. Like, I'm sitting there, I can't even look at anyone, I can't even move, and I'm literally just having what I think is a sort of silent, still panic attack. As soon as I can, I grab my phone and I pretend that I'm getting a phone call that means I have to leave. Within about 3 minutes, I'm gone. I'm out of the door, bag, phone, I'm out. And so I'm trying to find my way out of this building, because this wasn't my college, never been there before. Take a few flights of stairs and I see a pair of double doors and I'm like, come on, let's go. I'm gone. And so I like burst through these doors and I see like this just beautiful kind of quiet privet hedge little garden with a bench, and I'm like, oh, so how do I get out? And I'm like, the doors have shut behind me, and I kind of get this feeling of like, oh, it's like a cul-de-sac, I'm stuck. So this whole thing, I'm now in this privet reflection garden thing, and I'm like, I don't even know how to get out of here. So I had this like secondary panic attack stuck in this garden, and I can hear people like walking on the other side of this privet hedge. I'm still in this kind of like, you know, fight or flight mode where I'm just like, I've got to go, man. So I literally crawl hands and knees in my Stella McCartney coat, bag, laptop, and I crawl through the mud out the underside of this hedge. And I see the students and people that are walking out, and I'm like, right, I can see how you get out of here, and I'm gone. And I start sprinting for the train station, because I'm just gone, and I'm just leaving. I'm just like, I can't do this. I can't do this anymore. I can't be in these situations anymore. And just for context, before this had even happened, me being invited to sort of experiment at this seminar, just experiment, an experimental participant, not even a speaker. I had actually started seeing a CBT therapist, and I was like, do you know what? I watch so much YouTube. I watch so much content where people are telling you, you just need to, you know, start working with somebody, go to Toastmasters, you need to work on your childhood trauma, you need to like all this stuff. And I'm kind of like, right, I'm gonna actually try and work with someone to see if I can come out of this problem, because at this point, fully sunk cost fallacy, of course, I had done my undergrad, my master's, and I'd got on to my dream PhD, and I was like, am I seriously just gonna walk just because I'm nervous, just because I'm anxious, just because I can't speak in these forums for discussion on topics I love? So I did start working with somebody, and the last few videos I did actually on this channel, some of it's about the CBT I was receiving. And yeah, so this was now kind of spring of 2019. I'm still doing my PhD research. I'm getting on with it, doing it at home, you know, no problemo really. I've mentally kind of checked out of really bothering with like seminars, workshops, giving lectures, this kind of stuff. And I was like, do you know what? One problem at a time, focus on getting this PhD done, and then we can worry about whether this is really a thing. But I basically end up in therapy to hopefully become just capable of being in these kinds of situations. And you know, we're working through some bits, and I kind of do reach a point where I'm kind of accepting that if this ain't it, if academia really isn't for me, even though I love Kant, even though I love philosophy, I think I'm okay with it. What I was thinking to myself was, you know, my husband, we can live off of his salary. We kind of have been anyway, just by, you know, obviously I bring in a bit of pocket money, doing proofreading and indexing, and obviously I've got my scholarship, which is pretty generous, and it's enough. We have a decent life. If this ain't for me, really, it's no tragedy. I'll be fine. And then, because this is just life, isn't it? Then my husband gets diagnosed with cancer. This is May 2019, and my husband, my soulmate, my bezzy, he's diagnosed with stage 3D cancer. They didn't tell us what the prognosis was, but if you did a bit of research, 50-50, you'll make a year. We'd only been married 1 year at this point. So we got married in April 2018. He got diagnosed in the May of 2019. I just couldn't believe, it was like, I thought I had problems before with like, oh, I can't give a talk, and oh, I'm like anxious in a seminar. This just like came along and was like volcanic black cloud just all over my life. Obviously worse than that, underneath it, I was so afraid. I was so afraid. Afraid first that I was gonna lose the love of my life, my absolute best friend. I was just totally heartbroken. I was beside myself, actually. I was really beside myself. So obviously this is just the worst thing that could have possibly happened. I was so afraid my husband would die, afraid of all the suffering he was going to be going through, surgery, the treatment, the dreams that weren't going to materialize for him, the plans he would have to change, the mortal perspective of it all. It's a cliche, but you never think it's going to happen to you or your loved ones. And when it does, honestly, nothing can prepare you for it. So obviously this now being a card we've been dealt, all the security that I thought I had made peace with, or that I thought had enabled my peace, just completely like cracked like a plate falling to the floor. A good pun, because my husband's Greek. Basically, I started scoping out the various options I did have for my financial security. Like, what was I gonna do? Because at this point, I honestly didn't think I would even have a place to live if my husband died. I didn't know, and he didn't know, that he had a generous pension that I would have been entitled to. But we didn't know any of that, and I just assumed that it was, gonna be, me not really having the same kind of income as he had. He was, a university professor, and I was at this point where I'm like, well, I'll be damned. What am I actually gonna do? Like, day to day, I was just beside myself and just trying to come to terms with the diagnosis, and obviously start getting through all the medical procedures that had to happen to enable his recovery. And I just basically started scoping out my options. As you might remember, if you've seen some of my previous videos, I started flirting with the idea of becoming a lawyer. Kind of a well-known narrative arc for a lot of people at undergrad especially, to be talking about doing a law conversion. And that was definitely, I think, a pretty popular choice amongst the philosophy undergrads. I think we all thought, people that go into law have sold their souls to the devil. But I did figure that actually, we're philosophy students, we spend all day unpicking arguments, we're, highly literate, good with words, good with logic, apparently. So I was kind of like, oh well, screw it, I'm gonna go for that. I knew that you could make crazy money in law, and even if you didn't make crazy money, you could make decent money. It's a good big investment. It'll be a good small investment. So I started getting the kind of wheels in motion to transfer into law. This is still the first year of my PhD, so this is now kind of going towards summer and then the start of my second year. As you might have seen in my previous videos, I was a little down on myself actually about my credentials and whether I would even be successful moving into law. I'm kind of older than a lot of these like young bucks that are going straight straight out of undergrad, I really thought, Jesus, like, I'm gonna need to really do something to differentiate myself here, because it wasn't that I thought I didn't stand a chance. It was more that I just thought, it's just an unusual background. Like, most of these dudes, they've either got a law undergrad or they've gone straight from like a, you know, a philosophy BA or whatever, and then they've gone straight for like the law conversion pathway. My background didn't look like that. You know, I had good grades. I'd obviously gone to good universities, but even with that, I didn't think it was a shoe-in at all, and I was like, well, I'll be damned, I'm gonna have to do something. So in my crazy, panicked, survivalist mentality, I just started researching the hell out of, you know, vacation schemes, everything, like applying for them, what your CV needed to look like, what your LinkedIn needed to look like. So at this point, I'm listening to all the podcasts, getting onto vacation schemes, how to get work experience. I subscribe to The Economist, the Financial Times. I'm still thinking everyone else will be doing this. Everybody else is listening to these podcasts, they're reading the thing, the blah, 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 blah. And I was like, what experience do I have? Really is pretty unique to me. Like, what is something that no one else is really likely to have on the CV? And I was like, well, I've been doing proofreading and editing and indexing kind of, you know, for my pocket money for the last like 12 years. Do you think I could like really say like I have a business? Like, maybe I could say, oh, well, you know, my commercial awareness comes from the fact that I, you know, make this income alongside my studies. And I was kind of thinking, well, that's, unless you've got something really material to kind of, to really flex there, I just thought it's just more rubbish. It's not going to cut it. You're not going to differentiate yourself just by saying you've proofread a few PhDs. So I was like, okay, I'm actually gonna do something way more upscale than that. And I was like, do you know what? I'm actually gonna start a business. I'm gonna go on Companies House. I'm gonna register a company, basically start trading. So at this time, I had already been doing, as I said, proofreading, indexing, editing for like 10 or so years, possibly even longer. Even before my undergrad, I was always interested in that, and I'd always made tiny bit of side income from doing that, maybe like, you know, a couple £100 a month or something, fun money effectively. I just thought, you know what, I'm gonna make this a thing. I decided to register the company, and at that time it had a name that it no longer has. Because I didn't know, I just literally had to come up with something. I was like, oh my god, what am I gonna call this? Like, I registered a company and paid like the £12 you have to do it. So this was enough. I was like, okay, so now when I'm applying for my vacation schemes, I can truthfully say I've got a company. Amazing. I then thought, well, that's all well and good, but what if someone wants to like check it out? What if they want to, you know, see what it's all about? And I was like, well, okay, well, I'm gonna need like a decent website then, because I already had like louisechapman.co.uk or whatever it was, and I was like, well, god, it looks a bit amateurish. So I mean, that website still exists actually, but I was like, I'm gonna start a brand. I'm actually gonna start a brand and like create, you know, an all singing, all dancing editing company. I was like, well, I'd obviously had like a tiny bit of money saved up from all the proofreading, editing and whatever I had been doing. Like, my parents thought I was never very good at saving money, so like with anything they thought I wasn't good at, I decided I need to be the best. You know, I did have some savings at this point, so even after like the crappening and then the cancer diagnosis, I had about, I don't know, I think I had about 15 grand saved or something. And I was like, well, you know what? I'm gonna spend a couple of grand getting a professional website done. At the same time, I was like, okay, so I'm actually gonna do this. And it was just a complete leap of faith. Like, that is the only way I can describe it, because I didn't think it would actually work. I just thought, you know what, if I'm going to be a lawyer, then I need something to say for myself that's pretty different from what, you know, every other Tom, Dick, Harry and Susan is going to be saying. So I was like, right, I'm going to do this. It will at least differentiate me on paper, even if it doesn't really amount to much in the real world. And then I was kind of like, well, what if it did amount to something? And at this point, my husband, who was, my goodness, what a trooper. You know, he was like limping around, having had the whole lymph node basin in his left leg removed. So this guy had been like eviscerated from like the hip down on the left hand side. He was like, why don't you actually like try to really do this? Like, you could have a business. It could be more than just this thing on paper that you're kind of trying to use to look good. And I was like, well, how am I going to do that? And you know, he was talking to me about different types of marketing I could be doing, and I was like, right. And I was like, part of me was like, I don't know how to do this. I can't. Like, what's he talking about? And he was like, I've got a friend who might know someone who can, you know, take on some of the workload. Because as it happens, I was getting a lot of requests for proofreading and editing and indexing, and I was saying no to a lot of people because I was obviously trying to do my PhD, and now I was trying to caring for my husband and that whole thing. And so I was saying no to people who were approaching me for this editing work. And he was like, well, why don't you get someone else who you can give some work to, but you take a cut? And I was like, oh, but what if it's not as good as what I would want to do? Because I was really perfectionistic, and I was like, oh God, really? I'm gonna actually delegate this work to other people? That sounds so weird. And so I literally, yet again, leap of faith territory, was like, okay, well, who do you know that does this? And he was like, oh, you know, I've got a few names, like, you can just write to them. and I was like, okay. I'm having this website built by Chameleon Studios in Cambridge, so I've got all that going on, and I'm literally just like, honestly, just, I have no idea what is going to happen. At this point, I'm just like, it could all come to nothing. The business might not be anything. Maybe I'll be a lawyer. Maybe my husband will live. Maybe he won't. But all I know is that I just have to keep going. That's all I've got. All I've got is just momentum, and I just went with it. And slowly but surely, I did start working with this other person who I was delegating some of my work to. I had this website, and I launched it, and my husband was giving me some ideas for like marketing and stuff, which I was doing, and it was working. And I obviously had this other person working with me, and it got to a point where they were at capacity as well. And I was like, oh. And at this point it was going nicely. Like, I was really happy with this, because obviously, for context, I'm still totally mortified, scared, horrified that my husband has cancer. But I'm also very much kind of in my lane, and really just leap of faithing this whole thing, just seeing, will I land on my feet at the end of this? Whatever happens, am I going to be homeless? Am I not going to be homeless? This kind of stuff. At this point, it's the early 2020s. I'm still writing my PhD, and I've kind of told my supervisor at this point that this isn't really what I want to do for like the rest of my life. And obviously I had also told her, my husband's been diagnosed with cancer, like, I'm going through quite a bit here. And I had said to her, you know, I do this other thing on the side and make a side income effectively. So I wasn't exactly hiding it, but it also wasn't taking over my life at that point. But it actually really started ramping up when the pandemic hit. This was a really challenging time, actually, because so obviously the pandemic hit March 2020, and my husband at this point, he'd had the surgery to have like the whole leg lymph node dissection, and there was a type of therapy that was specific to his cancer and stage. It was called immunotherapy, pembrolizumab. He was meant to have, I think, 6 months of this. It was really unfortunate because so this drug, its efficacy was about 50-50. So for 50% of people who had it, they would be recurrence free 5 years thereafter. And for the other 50%, the cancer would recur and they would have to go for the next line of treatment, which is a dual immunotherapy. Thank God it didn't have to do that. So yeah, we managed to get 2 cycles of immunotherapy before the hospital basically made the decision that my husband was too clinically vulnerable during COVID for the treatment to be worth the risk of catching COVID. This was not good news. And we were like, well, we'll be crossing everything then that this thing doesn't come back, because yeah, it was a very high risk tumor. And while, obviously it was stage 3D, so it was like there was like local metastases to the lymph nodes, and like I think half of the ones they took out had disease in them, and it was just like a terrible situation. But so that's on the one hand, taking up quite a bit of bandwidth, fear and stress. But also, I've now got this like business thing. So I mean, this is a blessing. This is a total blessing, because not only is it actually serving as a potential financial lifeline should I need it, and obviously it's nice to have additional income, not gonna sniff at that, of course, but also it's a very welcome and pretty all-consuming distraction from just the dire sadness and panic and fear of the sort of cancer side of our life. So we just keep going. COVID was a hard time, was a really hard time, hard for everybody, of course, but even harder when you've got, you're managing a cancer diagnosis or some other condition. I mean, there's loads of ways life can be crap. During COVID, this is when things get kind of extra crunchy, I think, because at this point, things even on the PhD side really slow down, and not just for me, not just because I have a husband with cancer and I have a business, but like everything, I mean, as you'll probably remember, everything just went like just kind of pear-shaped, really, and normal programming was certainly not the thing. So a lot of people totally slowed down writing their theses. Supervisions obviously all went online, and all of like the workshops, seminars, lectures, the ones that did happen were Zoom enabled. And so yeah, this was another sort of, in some ways, a kind of boon, because the pressure had kind of moved away now from getting the PhD wrapped up in 3 years. And I think as a cohort, we'd been told, you guys will probably be able to have like another year of funding based on how disruptive this has all been. And obviously, for me, I'd also had the cancer card thrown my way as well. So there were mitigating circumstances galore, really. And this definitely enabled me to double down on my business. And at this point, I remember as the months kind of ticked by, things were getting very interesting from the business. So it got to a point where the income I was getting from the business was very good, much better than I had ever expected. And I was at this inflection point where I was like, I don't think I have to be a solicitor to make decent money. I think I could do this like full time. And so I kind of made the decision that I wasn't going to be a lawyer. I wasn't going to submit those applications for vacation schemes. I wasn't going to do it. And I was like, I'm gonna do this business thing. And I think in the beginning it was bringing in a couple £100 a month, but within 6 months it was a couple of thousand. And then by a year after the pandemic started, I remember, because I have this picture of me with a bottle of champagne, and I just had my first 20 grand month. And it was crazy. It was crazy because I had no expectation that the business was actually going to be a proper business, a proper business with employees and, corporation tax and this whole, pensions. And it didn't even figure in my head that was actually going to be more than just some claim I made about myself on my CV for getting into law. But yeah, so by a year after the pandemic, after the pandemic had started, because obviously it didn't just last a year, things were getting very, very interesting. So March 2021, I remember we had that first month where the business had made £20,000 that month, and I was in complete disbelief, really. And I was, talking to a few people and saying, I don't know how this has happened, but my business seems to be doing really good. And I started talking to a few people from undergrad, actually, one person in particular, and he was like, you might want to think about getting an investor. You're at an early stage and you're clearly growing pretty quickly. You might want to think about, selling a stake in your company. And I was like, God, wow, well, that would be crazy. I honestly really didn't think anything would happen from it. And so this meeting is penciled into my diary, and I'm like, wow, God, I'm actually going to meet someone who might want to buy shares in my company. And that day I remember it was a bit like that day I gave my first ever talk. Took a few beta blockers because wow, was I nervous. And this amazing man, he bought into our company. And at this point, I'd actually, my husband was doing really good and was recovering beautifully from the surgery. He had clear scans, so as far as we could tell, he was clear of cancer. And I had basically decided, my husband is a philosophy professor, and huge, he's a fair bit older than me and just hugely knowledgeable about publishing, how to get onto good university programs, how to get funding, how to write really good book proposals, and just he has like a wealth of knowledge and experience that nicely complements mine. And I just said to him, like, do you want in on my company? Like, at this point we were obviously official on Companies House, and we had like shares that could be issued, and I was like, do you want half my company? Like, I want to do this with you. You're a legend. You're incredibly knowledgeable and just the best partner I could ever hope for. And I was like, do you want to like share in this with me? Just like fully share in this? And he was like, yeah. It was starting to become this dream team, basically. So my husband now had half the shares, and so we together went to this meeting to meet our potential investor, and we were incredibly fortunate that our investor is such a kind, super intelligent, just like a second dad, effectively. Couldn't ask for a better influence and mentor. And yeah, so he bought in, and it basically confirmed the company's value in the millions. And we were just on such a kind of upward curve of just happiness, really. We'd come so far from the panic attacks in Cambridge, the cancer diagnosis, the cancelled treatment, the COVID hell, and suddenly this business that was born out of just so much unexpected adversity was just doing so well. And that success for kind of third parties to look at that and be like, yeah, I want in on it, and here's my money and thanks for my shares, and all, like, it was just mind-boggling. I couldn't understand it. I got to a point where I was like looking at like my bank account. I think I've got like a screenshot of or like a little selfie of me posing with like, sounds terrible, like the money in my bank. And I remember sending it to my parents, and I was like, I can't believe this is happening. Like, obviously I really wanted them to say, well done, we're proud of you, and they did. But really, like, it was just such a trip. Like, I couldn't get my head around what I had made, and what I had made out of so much pain. And even now, like, I'm now 4 years into running this business, and I've got, employees and hundreds of editors, indexers, translators. It's honestly been more than I could ever have dreamed of. The fact is that I actually had no idea that running my own business was the thing I was meant to be doing. I had no way of knowing that was true. And maybe there are other potential careers I could have done, but I remember the feeling of failure, actually, when I kind of realized academia wasn't going to be for me, and that academic environments in general just made me feel just super uncomfortable, way out of my depth, rightly or wrongly. Like, I felt like this, and I have to honor those feelings and give them their validity. I think the truth of the matter is that it wasn't that I wasn't good enough to be an academic, which is the conclusion a lot of people come to when they get to the end of the road with something. I don't actually think that. I just think I have the wrong personality for academia. And for me, the process of even doing a PhD it wasn't really about discovering the nuances of Immanuel Kant. It was about discovering the nuances of my own psychology. That is how I became an accidental academic entrepreneur. Today we've turned over, I think, nearly $2 million. It amazes me that it's only been 4 years, actually. Like, sometimes I think, wow, that's gone really quickly. And it's been mental. I've learned more in this 4 years than I had in the previous 30. No doubt about it. Do let me know if you have any questions. I'm definitely planning to make videos more regularly, hopefully once a fortnight. Thank you so much for watching, and if you did like the video, obviously smash the like, and if you do want to keep up to date, please subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you really soon.